So let's go back to this map, okay?
Okay.
And the Americans have a three-pronged strategy to strangle Iran. The first is to use ground forces to establish sport operating bases to incite ethnic violence in the country. The second is to block off the Strait of Hormuz and cut off Iranian financing. The third is to strangle Tehran and cause the people to rise up against the government, okay? The Russians, so if things stay as they are now, America wins easily. But if Russia were to enter the war on behalf of the Iranians, the first thing that Russia would do is provide Tehran with reinforcement from the Caspian Sea, right? Because the Americans want to knock out Tehran's capacity to provide food, water, and electricity to its people. But through the Caspian Sea, the Russians can support the Iranians. But not only that, and this is much more important, if the Russians were to come in, they could also bring the Chinese into the war on behalf of the Iranians. And the Chinese could use the Belt and Road Initiative, basically the railway system, to reinforce Tehran from the east. So now you can no longer strangle Tehran because the Russians and the Chinese are reinforcing Tehran. Then what the Russians could do is provide financing to the Iranians. Basically, the Chinese and the Russians can say to the Iranians, don't worry about financing. We will give you enough financing for you to continue this war for as long as you want. And we'll use our resources as collateral for this financing. Right? And the third thing, and this is actually the most important, is that Russia could put Iran under its nuclear umbrella. And this would negate the use of tactical nuclear weapons. The Israelis and the Americans, if they really felt under pressure, if they were really put in a corner, they could always choose to use tactical nuclear weapons. If the Russians were involved, that negates that option, right? So if the Russians get involved in this war, they bring the Chinese, they provide the resources and the financing to continue this war for as long as it takes, right? And now the Americans need to expand this war all around the world to try now to topple the government in Russia, because the Russians are the main backers of the Iranians.
And you're predicting that Russia will get involved here?
According to the grand strategy of Russia, the Russians have no choice but to get involved, because what will happen is that if you look at this map, if Iran were to be conquered by the Americans or the Israelis, the entire southern flank of the Russians are now exposed to possible attack. And that's something that the Russians would never allow to happen.
The sovereign flank, so this from underneath?
Basically, right? But not only that, but the Americans already have close relations with Azerbaijan. And they already have bases in Turkmenistan as well as Uzbekistan, right? So you can see how once the Americans consolidate this area, they can now attack Russia from the south. But what's most important is the issue of global trade, where like a counter to America's naval blockade is by creating a Eurasian trade bloc that involves Iran, Russia, and China. If you look at Russia's north-south corridor, right? If you look at Russia's north-south corridor, it runs through Iran. If Russia wants to access the Middle East as well as Africa, it has to go through Iran. Look at China's Belt and Road Initiative, it goes through Iran as well. So by taking out Iran, you've blockaded both Russia and China. The political leadership in Iran believe that they can wait Trump out. So they're waiting for the midterms because they believe that in November, the Democrats will win the midterms, and then they will impeach Trump and basically constrain his capacity to fight wars. And worst case scenario, Trump will be gone in 2028, as you point out. There are certain problems with this. The first major problem is the national defense strategy, which we looked at previously. The national defense strategy, it is a long-term strategic framework for how America can control the world. And so one possibility is that Trump is just creating enough chaos for America to transition. When the Democrats come to power, if they come to power, they will institutionalize this strategy. And we know this as a possibility because in Trump's first term, he changed America's strategy around the world. And then when Biden came into power, he then institutionalized the strategy via China, right? So it was Trump who launched this terror war against China, and then Biden comes in power and institutionalizes it, right? So I think World War III, it's a much more long-term war of attrition. And I don't think that this war will end anytime soon.